Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We can't wait to introduce this guest. This is Jesper Launder, who is a medical herbalist and a master forager. We've known him for a few years, and he's taken us on a few forages, both personally, but also as well as that, we've done it as a work event. We've loved it every time, and it's probably the fastest 3 to 4 hours I've ever noticed in my life. Always ending in brilliant kind of mushrooms, fantastic knowledge. We are just ridiculously happy to introduce him to you, really. He takes seasonal eating to a whole new level, but also can show you exactly what you can pick, where you can go, and my favourite, also the environment you'll find things in. Welcome.
Hello, guys. Hi there.
We had a little bit of a technical difficulty to start, but we're perfectly now in focus, which is great. And I think probably we'll start by asking a little bit about how you got into foraging and herbs.
Okay, that's a good question. I get a kid. I spent this was in a sense it was out of my hands. My folks got a place in the middle of France, in the middle of nowhere, with a view to doing up some old farmhouse. And I was pretty young at the time when they got that place, and it was a labour of love. It took years. So I grew my holidays, my summer and Easter holidays were spent in the middle of the countryside, in the middle of nowhere, no friends, no one to play with, but there was nature. So I immersed myself in the natural world. And then when I came back, my home was Manchester. I came back, and what I realized, because I'd seen so much of it in France, was that actually I was surrounded by nature in the urban setting of Manchester.
Yeah. And did anyone teach you some of the mushroom side, some of the other side? Did you go out with other people?
No, all my knowledge is self-taught. I say self-taught. It was courtesy of books. I'd get books and then just immerse myself, reading cover to cover, and all the way through wintertime. I wasn't reading them every day, but I'd pick them off the shelf every now and then, and just kind of, it was like there's a drive to revise, to try and soak up as much. So then the next time I'd go out when the mushrooms were up, I'd see things and I'd instantly I could almost say what page it was on.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then I'd be able to go back and join the dots, and I guess it's just been, I've continued joining all those dots over the many years in between.
Yeah, well, I suppose from our point of view, I mean, when we've been out with you, we do predominantly look for mushrooms. What was it about mushrooms that drew you in? I mean, from my very limited knowledge, or possibly almost none, from my point of view, it's kind of like, it seems almost scary to go after mushrooms, I suppose. We're kind of taught that, they can hurt you.
Well, I think for me it was the fact that, what drew me in was the fact that there were these ethereal things that you suddenly go to a bit of my local park where I'd be playing and hide and seeking with friends all the time, and so that things everywhere, and you suddenly get these conditions where boom, the mushrooms come up.
Yeah.
And I recognize that in the experiences. And because I had books, and because my mum was Danish, or is Danish, she didn't have an experience of mushrooms herself. But what she didn't have, which I think a lot of Brits have, is that kill yourself if you touch that. So she allowed me to. She trusted my judgment when I joined the dots. She double checked what
It's good.
I thought.
We're having a little bit of a technical problem. We're having a tiny bit of a technical problem, Jesper, and we can't hear you every now and then. It's cutting out. So we might have to ask you just repeat that little bit again. Sorry.
So
I don't know if we've lost you again.
I don't know if you can hear me now. In Danish, gave me the freedom, in a sense, to be able to trust my judgment. And she would allow, she would allow me to sample and to eat the things that I found that I'd identified, which is interesting at that time.
Yeah, fantastic. That's the best thing, really, isn't it? I suppose it's having the confidence, really, to kind of have a go at it, see what's going on, and then having like a bit of a safety check in the background. So using a book, using a resource that you can kind of, back yourself up. Because, I mean, these things are very identifiable, really. What you showed us is they stand out quite
There are
a
certain
lot.
ones that are quite easy for us to. We've learned a few, not many, but we can see that there are certain ones that maybe would be easier, and other ones which I think you'd then want to seek help on.
Yeah,
I think you want to check.
I mean, a lot of fungi are very distinct. It's just the fact that there are so many of them.
Yeah.
So it's if you're thinking about edible fungi, then just getting familiar with a handful of really very distinct, very easy to identify ones is nice, but you still have to find them.
Yes. And I think what you taught us when we went out foraging with you is actually something I never realized, which is looking at habitat is like your number one. Looking at the different trees that you're near and looking at the area that you're in will give you a much greater clue. And that was something I should have thought about it, but I didn't. I think seeing which trees, so I think being able to identify the trees helped as well. I think having that knowledge overall. And I think from our point of view, we probably ask what sort of books, what sort of things, resources would be good for people if they wanted to get into this.
There's some brilliant books around these days, more so than when I got into this as a kid. There's an excellent resource which is as kind of often described as a Bible for people getting into the world of mushrooms, which is called Mushrooms by Roger Phillips, and that's going back a few years. Is getting on towards. There's some more recent guys as well. There's an excellent book called Mushrooms. It's part of the River Cottage series by a chap called John Wright. John's great, and his writing is.
I was watching him on YouTube the other day. He was telling you about dandelion coffee. He was amazing.
Yeah, he's got great experience, and mushrooms. Whilst he loves wild food broadly, mushrooms again is I think his favourite subject.
I can see why they're my favourite subject too. Simply just because they're the most tasty we can possibly find outside. But what surprised me really was when we did the first foraging with you and you showed us them, is that I think you get used to kind of, maybe a mix of wild mushrooms from the supermarket, maybe a chestnut mushroom. But actually, when you go foraging and you taste all those different varieties, they're just so different and they're so powerful in their taste.
Yeah.
It was huge differences in what you can see, and the flavour was just. You feel like you've had like a tiny sample when you've had like your home cooked.
It's actually
mushroom.
why you go out foraging for 3 hours, just so you can taste them at the end, because they're so fantastic,
and they're all so different.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of other aspects of wild food, there are wild cresses, there are wild garlics, there are wild versions of flavors that we're familiar with. The depth of flavor, the textures, the flavor profile when they're cooked up, just completely knocks the socks off anything you get in the shops.
Yep. And it's also so easy. I mean, you showed us wild garlic, and we've been doing kind of wild garlic pestos and wild garlic butters ever since. And I just can't believe the difference. It's literally just a packet of butter and some wild garlic, but it transforms anything you cook with it. And it's just using something that's wild.
Very easy foraging, because I think anyone can identify it with the smell and with the ability when you go out there. And I think what we've learned from you is that things like the Hawthorn ketchup that you taught us to make as well. There are lots of these recipes that actually we've taken on board just from going out with you for a few hours. I think hopefully people will watch in the video that we did when we went out. I think is just about to go on Adio, and it just gives you that amazing experience being outdoors, spending that time in the fresh air. I think that you can see you have a real passion for it. It's really amazing when we have been out with you.
I think one of the questions I'd ask is, it's just a question I ask is really just time of day, because I've always wondered with mushrooms. I don't know, are they early morning? Is it best to go later in the evening? I always wonder if there's a kind of, I don't know, is there a kind of time when they grow when you're easier to find them?
People say that the best time to pick mushrooms is first thing in the morning, and there may be something. I think the biggest threat to good mushrooms that you might want to pick is somebody else picking them. However, I found unbelievably good things as the sun setting, and it's the tail end of the day. I've even done nighttime foraging and had some incredible finds. So I'm not convinced that mushrooms will continue growing throughout the day and night. So that timing thing is maybe less important. But if you're in a rod there.
Yeah, I think we lost you again a little bit. We're struggling a bit with the connection, I think, tonight. We'll just see.
What about in terms of like dry or damp weather? That's what I always wonder, because when we went the other day, you kept saying it was a bit dry. I'm assuming mushrooms, to my mind, fungi, they must prefer moist, kind of damp almost kind of weather.
Yeah. They need so also need carbon dioxide, so air exchange is important. So if there's a bit of a breeze, or there's somewhere growing somewhere exposed, that helps. And often they need a bit of sunlight as well. So it's a kind of, if it's too wet, you won't find many mushrooms. If it's too dry, you won't find many mushrooms. It's just sometimes people who've been foraging for years say that you can smell it in the air. Some days you'll put your nose out of the door and there's something there which just tells you today's the day to get to the woods.
Like a humidity in the air, maybe. And I think if we also, the other thing we've learned when we've been out with you is we've learned all the other amazing plants that you can find. I think, are there some top things that you think people can have a look for, they can identify? I think we talked about things like elderberries when we went out, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of things already. You mentioned, say, wild garlic and hawthorn berries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have to get your right. The same thing about somewhat toxic lookalikes. But if you're in the wild, it's and you get familiar with what the leaves of an elder look like, it's fairly straightforward. Yeah. Beyond that, there are members of the garlic family there, which are really easy to identify.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So there's many members of the cress family. Yeah. The carrot family is a family which I really enjoy eating members of. You're really familiar with that group is important because there are deadly poisonous species in that that group. But some of them are quite distinct and very good eating.
And I think we saw some of that, didn't we, when we were out? Did we see some of that? What did we see when we were out? Giant hogweed.
We met hogweed.
Hogweed, didn't we? That's not, yeah. And I think we saw hawthorn and we saw elderberries. What else did we see?
I was most impressed really by how many things you managed to find that were hot.
They were all, yeah, they were all.
You managed to find some impressively spicy things. I have to say, I've never had anyone hand me a piece of mushroom that was so incredibly spicy.
Yeah, and peppery.
But it's amazing the power you managed to find, and also how little you told me how hot that was going to be. But
well, that's half the fun, surely.
I know.
Yeah.
And we were in a pretty urban setting. I think we lost you.
Yeah, and this kind of it highlights one thing that's pretty important when it comes to foraging is that you're using all your senses. So we tend to rely just on our visual cues for the things that we encounter. However, in terms of really pinning down ID, smell and taste, and you don't taste anything. You have to be familiar with which things are appropriate to taste. Randomly tasting plants may cause
definitely hurt your stomach
or some pretty nasty reactions. In a sense, even though it sounds crazy, for tasting any mushroom may give you a clue that helps you to actually pin down the species. It won't give you clues to edibility straight off. As you tasted it, but that was one of the things that we were doing on our walk, obviously.
It did seem also as well when you did point out ones that you shouldn't eat. It really did seem that, I think in my head, I think that they're poisonous. But what you were basically saying was really all that happens, you get a digestive reaction. That seemed to be the most common thing you get pointing out was basically they just give you a digestive reaction. And I think my head goes poison death. Yeah. And you were going, no, just digestive reaction. And you're like, okay. But even with some of them, you were like, actually, you can just take pieces off it and then it won't do it. They do that. So one of them was slimy and you're like, just take the slime off. And actually it won't do that. And I think that was what surprised me. I was like, oh, it's not like they're actually that deadly.
Some of them affect your kidney, though. You can have a few that... Yeah. There are a few ones I'd not want to mess with too much.
But even that was, you had a lot of them, wasn't it? You had a few of them.
Yeah. I mean, for example, if you head out on any kind of local woodland, you go on a foray with any of this, and you pick maybe a random 20 species that you encounter, odds on there are going to be quite a lot of poison.
I think half our basket maybe was filled with about that when we went out.
Yeah, something of that nature. But equally, the chances of having a deadly poisonous mushroom in that basket is going to be that they won't have poisonous ones, but actually comparatively very few deadly.
Yes. I think that's where the terminology can get confusing, can't it? I think everyone just thinks poison is death. And actually poison is just, it will hurt you.
And your body will choose to throw up, probably.
Yes.
You'll get upset the other way and get rid of it.
That's the reaction, isn't it? Your body will recognize the problem and basically expel it. And then and probably not in a very nice way, but it shows you that actually the ones that comparatively actually can really kill you off are very small. They are very small. But it's also knowing someone who can guide you through all that. And you were, when you showed us, the different sides to it, they were very recognizable, the bits that were not good.
Yeah.
You gave us some very, very good tips and what actually, look for this and it's a problem.
I think I've probably just learned a handful. I think he's right with that. I think what I've learned one, I've learned my shaggy cap. I've learned a few different ones that I can now see, and I think relatively reliably I can spot maybe 2 or 3.
Yep.
I know are not too bad. And I think, hopefully they get to go out with you foraging, but they could maybe find someone else who can take them out foraging. There must be other mushroom experts as well that hopefully are a bit people can find. And it's getting someone experienced to do that, and maybe using the right books as well. So
that's of really good mushroom foraging experts who I know around the country. John Wright, obviously, who's the author of this mushroom book associated with River Cottage. He does events, but throughout the country there are a large number of different foraging teachers. There's an association of foragers. And if you seek that out online, then you can find teachers who can actually give you skilled guidance in your area.
I think it's a bit of a lost art, unfortunately. Not many of us have. I wish I had a parent or a grandparent who could show me. But I think it's something that I get asked about it all the time, trying to find someone experienced. So I think if you have details of that, we'll put it up afterwards on Adio on one of the boards, and that would be great for people to have. And also, we'd massively encourage them to sign up to a waiting list to come out with you at some point if they can, because it's great fun. I suppose we'd ask you a little bit about the herbal side, really. I think, something that I think as a herbalist, the reason that I studied the Western herbs is because now we can see a lot of them on our doorsteps. And I think rather than the Chinese herbs that were a long way away from me, when I studied the herbs here, I really love the fact that I could identify some of them. And I think we talked as we went out about the different herbs you can find around you, things like nettle and other things. Do you make your own herbal products from them? Do you make things from your own?
Yeah, it was one of the things that I really wanted to do when I started. When I graduated, for one, I got an ethanol license, and I was then kind of allowed to go and make tinctures. And you can make them independently anyway. It just allowed me to kind of step up the and I still do a number of tinctures, obviously liters of tincture, annually, which isn't a huge volume, to be honest, in terms of the amount that I'm dispensing for patients. But it feels like it feels as a herbalist, it's a fundamental thing that I must do.
Yeah.
And it helps to keep me connected to the plants and to the the passion, the relationship with plants and medicine. I make a number of medicinal mushroom extracts as well.
Do you? And do you make those using the alcohol as well, or using, some people use different ways of doing that, don't they? Steam distill them, some people.
Techniques, but I often do either hot water extraction, which I might use ethanol to preserve, or I'll actually use ethanol as a solvent to take particular compounds out, and put it in at a particular strength depending on what it is I'm trying to extract. And sometimes the water-based preparation and the alcohol-based preparation are combined together, so you get a kind of more rounded, complete medicine in a sense.
So we say as herbalists quite often that alcohol pulls certain things out of plants, and then water can pull out different things. And I guess that combination is fantastic. I do that a little bit as well with the Chinese herbs sometimes, and I think it works really, really well.
What sort of things would you treat with that?
What sort of things are mushrooms good for health-wise? I think would be a good question.
Yeah, good question. Really good question. So, I mean, mushrooms are they're incredibly powerful medicines, as plants are, obviously. But there are structural components that are found in pretty much every mushroom, in a sense, has either bound or not bound to proteins. You get chitin, which is like the exoskeletons of insects. Chitin-like and chitinous substances, providing the structure of a mushroom, basically. And And when you make a hot, slow water or slow hot water extraction of those compounds, you get an extract from them, and those compounds have medicinal effects. So pretty much every mushroom, in theory, every mushroom will exert some degree of medicinal activity, but some of these long chain sugars within particular species exert kind of dramatic effects.
So we have
within the.
We have a lot we use as herbs now, don't we? I mean, there are a lot of mushrooms that we use herbally that we find fantastic, and the research is growing all the time.
Mm.
And do you have any favorites that you like to find? Do you have ones?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are, you know, for anyone who looks into the research around medicinal species, I mean, your best place to be looking is Far East, where they've been doing research for 50, 60 years for a lot of the key species. And it may be a surprise, but actually the bulk of those species grow in the UK. And so we've got some remarkable medicinal tools. I guess the things that I grow in relative abundance in the UK that I collect and make medicines of most of all are turkey tail, which is herbalists call it Coriolis, which is the old Latin name for it, but these days it's known as Trametes versicolor. It's a beautiful small bracket fungus that grows in large amounts usually on dead wood, sometimes on living trees. And there's another medicinal species called maitake, or hen of the woods, which is highly sought after as a food. It's a gourmet, delicious, edible species. But the medicine you make of it not only tastes great, but it does incredible things to the immune system.
Yeah, I would say hen of the woods is definitely my favorite mushroom in
Posh
terms
restaurant
of eating.
one we've eaten.
It tastes like it tastes almost like a steak. It's unbelievable, but I generally don't eat that much meat when we go to some restaurants. But hen of the woods is always what they replace it with, and it's unbelievable. Hen of the woods is a fantastic tasting one. Its depth of flavor is probably my favorites.
Yeah, Xandra loves it. She became a bit obsessed by that mushroom.
A little bit, yeah. So I'm very excited. It's also got medicinal properties too, so that's good.
So what does it have in medicinal properties? What are the medicinal properties of hen of the woods?
It contains beta glucans, which are a group of hot water. If you dry it out, you end up with about 35% of the dry weight extracted into water. And it just has a powerful primarily it does exert anti-cancer activity, and certainly has particular relevance for some cancers. It's got relevance for estrogen dependent breast cancers and brain tumors in particular, but it's one of the it's incredible. So herbalists often use a herb called echinacea, which can be taken at the onset of an infection, and often if you take it in hold. My experience of using maitake or hen of the woods is that it will, even when an infection's actually started to take hold, beyond the point of natural by taking hen of the woods extract.
Gosh, so you could use it like you use echinacea. Brilliant. I think that's fantastic.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Because I mean, if it's got such a fantastic depth of flavor and it's got such a powerful immune boosting side, I don't know. I wonder if there's some sort of relationship between that flavor and the kind of the herbal power. I'm not sure. I'm not a big kind of knowledge base on what turkey tail would taste of. I mean, is that a good eating one or not?
I don't think. Can you?
It's too tough to eat as it is. Some people do make a stock out of it, but the stock's it's got an intense mushroom flavor, but you make your extract out of it, it goes very dark. Again, it has a very high content proportion dried weight of these water soluble compounds, and you can even simmer it very slowly, reduce it down to a solid.
People make stocks out of some of these mushrooms, don't they? They make stocks out of them and use
taste wise. Yeah, you could do. I've had meals made or soups made, kind of miso style soup made with turkey tail as a broth as a base for it. Even at a fairly low concentration, I find it a bit tricky to work with. It's not my
fair enough.
It's not, and so the maitake, because it tastes so good, you've got all this umami there. Maybe that's a reflection of activity. Certainly, strong tastes are. But sadly, the majority of the medicinal mushrooms don't taste as delicious as the hen of the woods.
But then you'd also say that about other things, wouldn't you? I mean, I find it interesting when we were saying before that you can use other herbs like nettles. I find it interesting that something that you'd look at as a weed is actually a ridiculously strong herb. It makes you wonder whether or not the strength of how it grows is also something to do with its strength in terms of its medicinal properties. Because nettles are supposed to be very good for kidneys, is it?
The nettle seed, I think we talked about, but then the nettle itself can be good for a lot of conditions. It's lots of minerals. And I think when we went out foraging with you, I think we realized the diversity of the different number of things that you can see when you look at woodland around us. I think it's a bit like Where's Wally for us. We were like, where is it? We can't see anything. And then suddenly you'd show us in Technicolor all these different things that are just literally within a few feet. I think it took us about an hour to walk about 10 feet down the path because there are so many things that you can find that go together. And I think it shows us how much we'd like to be in that world generally and how much we'd like to go out and forage and learn a bit more about it.
And how fast you can spend 4 hours. Although I have to say I was rather a good mushroom spotter.
Yes, you got very good at it after a while. I think we're going to hugely enjoy everybody. Hopefully we've condensed it a bit. We've not put 3 hours on the video. I think James, our tech person, got it down to hopefully about 45 minutes. So it's not too bad. But he took all the exciting bits and put them all together. And I think hopefully it will show people that enthusiasm and that energy that you get just from being outside and engaging with the natural world.
I think it's a question really on environment. You said when we were out on the forage that you found that there were 2 types of tree that gave the best environment that you knew to look in between. I mean, if you had to describe your kind of most likely environment to find mushrooms, what would you describe that as being?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, you often a location close to the moisture levels are maybe a bit more consistent and a bit more reliable in that kind of habitat. I do like I like conifer woodland. So pine and spruce, particularly pine being my preferred coniferous woodland space. In terms of deciduous woodland, there are kind of 3 tree species which are really, really good, and I'd struggle to pick out a favorite because they each have, when they have their moment, it can be incredible. Beech is very dry in beech woodland, so beech comes to life after heavy rains and prolonged rain often. But birch, which is birch woodland's naturally damper. Birch can be quite steady in its fruiting, and there's lots of species that grow in association with birch. And the third one being oak, which is maybe somewhere in between the 2 of them. And what's nice, because you've got different tree species that have these associations, is that those habitats are different. So you might find you go into oak woodland and beech woodland, and there's nothing there. And around the corner you've got a bit of conifer and habitats is again one of the biggest pointers in a sense for finding things. And the more things you see, the more likely you're gonna encounter something which becomes familiar to you, or that you maybe have seen or heard about. So it's a joy because by doing that you're out in nature, and you're soaking up the smells and your sensory experience of all these places is pretty profound. So there's nothing but
no, we slept amazingly. We had a great time we were out. I think the fresh air does you a lot of good.
Yeah, it was definitely an amazing experience, and that's really what we wanted to show, I suppose. So we're very grateful for you taking us out, but also the fact that we were able to kind of take that video of it and condense it down into it and put it onto audio so that anyone can have a look at that and see basically what a foraging experience is like, and get that kind of taster as to the fact that it's just the fact that it's so exciting. You're walking along and all of a sudden you can see something, and everything was exciting. I mean, you feel quite childlike going around. It's like going around a nature sweet shop, and you start seeing everything slightly differently, and you even get to recognize those things later. And
it's totally mindful, really. It's totally mindful, because you don't think about anything else through that time. I think it's a great skill for people to learn. It's a really great thing to teach kids. I want my kids to learn it as they get a bit older. And it's really all about what audio is, and that is we want to show everyone that you can eat seasonally, you can find things in your local environment, and it's very, very important for kind of like a world where we were locked down for a while, that actually on those walks you can go out and do things that are a bit different, and it's being able to explore and see what you have in your local area. I mean, we were really quite urban when we did ours, and it was still so fruitful. Yeah, in the middle of Stockport, it was in a pretty urban setting. Yeah,
past dog walkers as we went along. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for joining us, Jesper. I'm sorry for the technical issues, but it was brilliant, and everyone can get to see on our video basically a forage with you, and we really hope that everyone can join us. And also at the same time, if anyone wants to join you, of course, you have a waiting list and you take people out as well.
We'll put your details up so that you can so that people can look at that, and if you can pass on the details for the Foraging Association, that'd be brilliant too.
Perfect.
So,
Yeah, of course. Great. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you
Thank you
very much
for joining.